Let me introduce Todd, and it kind of used to be, I think, that you use the word geek and you kind of hide under the table. That's not the case anymore. Being a geek is a pretty cool deal, and I think Todd will expand on that. Todd is the co-founder and editor of GeekWire. I went online to the website, and I encourage you to do that too. It's a pretty impressive website with a lot of testimonials, a lot of things that they do. Yeah, it's a news site in the Pacific Northwest and the hub of the regional tech community. Let me just give you a little background on Todd. As we first introduced ourselves, Todd's a journalist that's broadened his scope of what he does and specifies now more into the tech world. It covers tech giants, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Apple, etc. And it has interviewed many of the big guys, Bill Gates, Paul Allen, Steve Wozniak, Jeff Bezos. And he has, as Betty alluded to, he has a weekly GeekWire radio show. It's on Cairo. Let's get through some of this. Before starting GeekWire with his longtime colleague John Cook, Todd worked for newspapers including the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Seattle PI when there was a print version of the PI, and the Puget Sound Business Journal. His tech reporting has received many, many awards and organizations including the Society of Professional Journalists and the Society of American Business Editors and Writers. Let's welcome Todd Bishop.
Great, thank you, Dwight. It's great to be here with all of you. It's quite a great group, and it's always fun to come to these types of meetings where the business community comes together and really connects. So it's great to have you here. And I should say I have two of my colleagues with me here. Adam Rubens is from our business team. He's back there. And Adam is a recent addition to our team. And we also actually have a very new addition to our team, Jacob Demet, who joined us just within the past couple of weeks from the Puget Sound Business Journal. He's a very accomplished technology reporter, and we're very happy to have him on our staff. So my goal today is to give you a sense for where we're headed in the technology industry, specific to the Pacific Northwest, but in ways that really resonate around the world as well. But to do that, I think it's really important to start by giving you basically a sense for where we've come from. And to do that, I actually don't have to go that far away. I want to start at this place. Does anybody recognize this house? This house, I'm surprised. I usually, if I ever cite this house, I ask that question and nobody knows, but I would expect this crowd to actually know because it's actually not that far from here. This is at the end of a long, winding road. The address is actually 10704 Northeast 28th Street in Bellevue, and I would imagine that many of you have actually driven by this house and not recognized its historical significance. And really, you wouldn't even notice the historical significance of this house until you looked at the mailboxes on the front. If you notice, one mailbox is significantly larger than the other. And the reason that mailbox is so large is that the guy who rented this place 20 years ago needed all that extra space for the book catalogs that he was receiving, for the index that he was building, for the site that he was developing. Because this is the birthplace of Amazon.com. So this was this guy's home back in the day. This is what it looks like now. It was converted. It was a garage when Jeff Bezos, he didn't own it. He rented it, which I think is somewhat telling. But this was the garage that has since been converted into a living room. I've always been fascinated with this house. I actually, in preparation for this, I went back and looked. It sold for $620,000 in December of 2009. So actually, right about at the trough of the market in some ways. Its current Zestimate, I guess I can use that phrase. It's Zillow estimate. Anybody want to guess what it is now if it was 620 in December 2009? 1.3. Whoa, that's very good. 950. 950 is what its estimate is. Of course, maybe that's a little bit inflated. It actually was going to sell. The reason I want to bring this up is this house exemplifies why we love covering technology in the Pacific Northwest. From the mind of the guy who occupied this space in the world emerged one of the most interesting and influential companies of our time. And this is really what we do at GeekWire. We get to cover these companies. Now, we weren't there when Amazon was there, but we're covering right now, I'll tell you, many of the future Amazons through the startups that we cover and the companies that we track on our site and through our radio show and everything else that we do every day. Amazon is actually a really fascinating company to follow. And I don't know how many of you have seen these renderings. These are the Amazon biospheres. In fact, I was driving over to get Jacob on the way over here, and I drove by their campus that is going up right on the northern edge of Seattle. And I think it's hard to point to any other company that's having as much influence, positive and in some cases negative, on the Seattle region than Amazon. It's a fascinating company to track. They just celebrated their 20th anniversary this week with Prime Day, and were able to stir up a bunch of interesting discussions and lots of sales. I don't know if anybody followed it. How many folks bought something through Prime Day this week? Okay. How many Amazon Prime? We got it in the back too. We got a, or maybe that wasn't that. No. How many Amazon Prime members? Oh wow. Okay, that's really telling. That's very interesting. Amazon is one of the most fascinating companies that we track, and it's one that has gone very far from those roots in that Bellevue house. This was Amazon's annual meeting, gentrification of the Seattle urban area, such as this protester who was outside. They protested very peacefully. It was a great demonstration. The other protesters were folks protesting foie gras, for example, in Amazon. So it's sort of the sign that you've arrived when the foie gras protesters show up. Because really, Amazon is the focus. In the way that Microsoft was in the 90s and the 2000s, Amazon has become very much the focus for not only political activists, but regulators, other businesses, and it's by far one of the most fascinating companies that we cover, and we can talk a little bit more about them later. Oh, by the way, does anybody know the original name of Amazon.com? Cadabra, as in abracadabra. That was the first name they came up with. In fact, that's how you can find the address of that first home. The reason they changed it was that it sounded too much like cadaver on the phone when they made their sales calls. And Jeff Bezos was like, okay, Amazon, it's Amazon. This is on the University of Washington campus. And I should say, I'm going to tell you 3 stories, and then we'll get to the part about the future. This is Wilcox Hall. It was known as Roberts Hall Annex. This was the former University of Washington Computer Science building. Can you imagine Bill Gates and Paul Allen as teenagers going through this hallway? I stood there and took this picture, and you could almost sense it, in part because I don't think the building's been upgraded since then. But it's just one of those places. This is where they learned to program on punch cards. So this is just an example of another place where it's very modest beginnings, and it can become something very, very large. Of course, Amazon didn't start in Redmond. I'm sorry, Microsoft didn't start in Redmond. It started in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Then, of course, this crowd should know they did not go to Redmond when they left Albuquerque. They came to Bellevue. That was their first address in the Seattle region. And in fact, this was essentially the Microsoft cafeteria when they moved here in the 1980s. You know, if you read some of the biographies of Bill Gates, he literally had this place on speed dial. And he would go to the Burger Master, and he was a big favorite of the Gates family. Now, of course, from this point, Microsoft went on to release some of the most influential products in the world. So that was one of my laugh lines. This is actually a great spot. This is, I believe, between buildings, 16 and 17. It's right across from the Microsoft headquarters at Building 34, if you know the Redmond campus. I might be getting the numbers wrong on this one. But they've essentially got all these tiles. They literally planted a tile for every single product that they shipped. They did it retroactively as well, back into the 1970s, so you can go in there and see the plaque for MS-DOS. But it's a fascinating place to go visit, and they have much more successful products like Windows 95 and that sort of thing. But this company is at a crossroads right now. This is one of the most fascinating stories in the regional tech economy. Of course, you have Bill Gates, Satya Nadella, and Steve Ballmer. And this transition that Microsoft is making right now is something that's made the company, for us, far more interesting to cover than it was even 2 years ago. But more importantly, it's a transition that is promising, at least, to make the company relevant again. That is the key question for Microsoft right now. It's not whether they're going to be profitable in 5 or 10 years, or whether they're going to still be making tens of billions in revenue. They're still going to be doing those things. I don't think there's any question. And I'm in part here channeling David Vaskovich, the former Microsoft Chief Technology Officer, who shared some of these thoughts with me, and I'm fully on board with this. His point is that the question is whether Microsoft is relevant and exciting, whether they can get back to that point where they are one of the icons of the industry. And they're certainly one of the most influential companies right now, but they're not setting trends. They're not the company that's out there coming up with the brand new ideas. They've got lots of things in incubation and lots of interesting things coming. But the key question is whether they can become the company that's actually leading the trends in the future. And that's going to be the key question to watch as you watch Microsoft, which is obviously a key driver of the economy here. Just this past week, there was the news of Windows Phone, and I actually think this is good news for Microsoft. Apart from the short-term pain, Microsoft laid off about 7,800 additional people worldwide. It was not a big impact in the Seattle region or in Bellevue or Redmond, but that was in addition to the 18,000 that they laid off last year. So this is a company that's very much focusing on its priorities, and what they're doing with Windows Phone is, rather than trying to compete directly with Android and iPhone, they're essentially going to be using Windows Phone as a flagship device to demonstrate what Windows can do. And they're going to be making more strategic bets with their devices, and they won't have as large a portfolio. But this is one key area to watch with the company. And then, of course, coming up later this month, this is Windows 10. Quick poll of the audience. Windows XP. How many folks are running Windows XP or at home at work? Okay, we got to talk. Okay, Windows Vista. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, Windows 7. Okay, Windows 8. Okay, and anybody beta testing Windows 10? Just to look at it. Just to look at it. Okay. So if you've been reluctant about upgrading from Windows 7, lots of Windows 7 folks in the audience, to Windows 8, because of all the negative things you've heard about it, give Windows 10 a shot when it comes out. It's going to be a free upgrade for you if you're running Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. As you can see here, they brought back the Start menu, which was one of the key criticisms. So it's the simple things in technology. Don't take that thing away from you. So that is something that's going to be key to watch here in the regional economy as you see where Microsoft is headed. The restructuring that Microsoft has done with Windows and its devices group is also really interesting to watch. Somebody, just in terms of personalities that you should keep an eye on, in addition to Satya Nadella, a gentleman by the name of Terry Myerson has kind of made an unlikely rise through the ranks of Microsoft. If you had asked me 5 years ago whether Terry Myerson would be running Windows and Microsoft's devices division, I probably would have said no. He's not the typical charismatic corporate leader. He's not the Kurt Delbennies of the world, or that kind of thing, if I can make that sort of inside baseball reference. He's very much a heads-down engineer, and he is somebody who's going to be worth watching. He's one of the most powerful people at Microsoft, apart from Satya Nadella. So maybe you should get him, he could be the follow speaker for you. This is another key thing to watch over at Microsoft. Does anybody know what this is? This is the HoloLens. So you've probably heard of Oculus Rift and the whole idea of virtual reality, where you wear a headset that essentially blocks your view, but presents a virtual world in front of you. HoloLens is not that. This is a Windows 10 device from Microsoft, and it's doing what they call blended reality. So what HoloLens does is it takes the real world, you can still see the real world through the visor, and then it places on that real world holograms. So this is one example of a utility, and you were talking about this whole world of virtual reality and the idea that it's not just games. Here's a prime example. I actually got to test this out during the HoloLens demo back at the Windows 10 unveiling in Redmond back in January. what this is showing is, this is a plumber on the other end of the line talking to a homeowner via Skype. The plumber has a Surface tablet right there on the lower right. Maybe that's her dad, but at any rate. You get a picture, it could be a plumber. And he's saying, he's literally drawing on the scene with his tablet, and what she's seeing is this. She's seeing him draw on the real world through the HoloLens. This is just one example of what they're doing. And when you see this, and then you think back to the question of whether Microsoft can innovate and truly lead areas, you start to go, okay, maybe they got a chance here, because this is fascinating. I've never, I don't know, maybe it's a flaw in my upbringing, but I'd never changed a light switch. You know, I've done other electrical things, but I'd never changed a light switch. In the demo, they literally led me through changing a light switch, and I'm standing here, so I'm that could be the maybe I'll make a pitch to be in the HoloLens ad with that. I'm alive. So this is some fascinating stuff, and something that's really, if you get a chance to do a demo, or if you can talk to some of your Microsoft neighbors, get them to get you in on a HoloLens demo. Microsoft has not yet said when this is shipping or how much it'll cost. Those are two key questions. This, to me, is one of the most telling charts about the region. Now, there's a few caveats with this chart, but just to give you the basics, that is Amazon's regional employment. So Google is kind of the baseline here. That's, okay, good, steady, up and to the right. It's kind of nice growth. That's just for people who are into this kind of stuff. That's excluding the Motorola acquisition. So it's normalized for that acquisition, as if it never happened, which I think Larry Page would actually prefer. Anyway, so that is Google. And then you can see Microsoft in blue, and you can see where they were growing. And then, of course, they had a big jump with some acquisitions that they made back in the 2014 era, and that's the Nokia acquisition, actually. And then you can see the layoffs that they made. This does not reflect the most recent layoffs. And there's Amazon. And now you can see what's powering things. Now, a couple caveats with this. Amazon's workforce includes warehouse workers in addition to traditional technology workers. This is also a global chart. Everything is global here. Microsoft is around 40,000 employees in the Puget Sound region. Amazon is roughly 25,000, so Microsoft is still a bigger footprint here in the Seattle area. But there is where you can see all that growth. I mean, that is just gigantic growth, and that is why they need all that extra space and why they're growing so quickly. I think, to me, this is one of the biggest concerns about the regional economy right now. Amazon is every quarter operating essentially at break even or at a loss. They're investing in the company. Now, I think they obviously do lots of things with bonds and all sorts of other things with the power of their financial position to recover from a big bust. But when you look at everything that they've been doing in downtown Seattle in particular, if there was a downturn right now, and you've got all those buildings going up, if somebody was to say, hey, what is the biggest risk to the regional tech economy from these tech companies, or to the regional economy as a whole, frankly, given how much everything is fueled by technology, and this is it, the fact that they might have gone too far too fast. So that's my one downer for the lunch. Okay, this is the third story. Everybody knows what this is. This is the Red Barn, Boeing's Plant 1, and this is, of course, at the Museum of Flight now. I bring this up because now this really is where things come together. The beauty of where we are right now as a region is the fact that we have the heritage of the technology industry, starting with Microsoft and Bill Gates and Paul Allen coming back to the region in the 1980s, really creating that nucleus of talent that has fueled so many other companies through spin-offs. You take that, and then you take Boeing and the heritage of aerospace and airplanes in the region, and all of the engineers and machinists and everybody who knows everything about flight. You take those two things together, and those two equal our future. And that future is commercial space. I think there's been a lot of discussion in the region about other sectors coming in to really fuel the economy for decades down the road. Things like biotech are obviously very promising, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you were to ask me to identify the one area that, if I were in Las Vegas and I were putting a chip down on that place, it would be commercial space. in terms of what is going to define the future of our region, not just this decade, but for many decades to come. Does anybody know what this Jake does, but that's not fair. Jake Bullinger from 425 Magazine's here too.
Is it a help survey asteroids to mine?
Yes, this is it. This is the planetary resource. This is a rendering. This is actually not in orbit, but they just announced this morning that they put their first satellite into orbit, their first asteroid hunting tester, I guess is the best way to put it. So for people who haven't been following this story, Planetary Resources is based here on the east side. Their goal is to mine asteroids, and that is their mission in life. And the whole idea is to send a fleet of autonomous robot drones into space to land on near-Earth asteroids and extract trillions of dollars worth of precious rare earth metals from those, and for other kinds of resources, water as well, to provide fuel for future missions as well. So it sounds nuts, and the guy who runs this introduces himself as like the chief asteroid miner. Until you realize who started this thing. So that guy is Chris Lewicki, and he used to be one of the flight directors for NASA's Mars rover mission. So this guy knows what he's doing. On top of that, the two co-founders are Peter Diamandis of the X Prize Foundation and Eric Anderson of all sorts of different space ventures, including a space tourism venture that's very prominent. So, and on top of that, they're backed by Eric Schmidt, Larry Page, Ross Perot Jr. I mean, these folks are legit. And it's one example of the bringing together of different talent from the software worlds and the world of aerospace. I'll go through a few examples here because it's incredible the amount of activity that's happening. This is Paul Allen's space venture, Stratolaunch. And basically they've taken two giant Boeing planes, they're in the process of doing this right now, to create what will be the largest aircraft ever made. So it's essentially, I think it's two Boeings, is it 747s? Do you know that, Jake? No? All right. I think it's two Boeing 747s melded together. And what they're going to do is they're going to take this up to the stratosphere and launch rockets from it. I mean, it's like, it's totally from science fiction. And of course, SpaceX, I mean, Elon Musk. This was fascinating. We actually, this give you a sense for the type of journalism we love to do. SpaceX came earlier this year or late last year and announced that they're opening a satellite operation in Redmond. It's a satellite in two ways. It's a satellite from their facility in California, and they're building satellites there. They're developing and designing satellites that will be deployed to create a internet in space that will beam internet signals back to the Earth, providing an alternative to fiber optic cables, this for long haul kind of internet. That is just the first step though. They're going to use the knowledge and the finances from that venture to go to Mars. Literally, they plan to colonize Mars, and they're starting in Redmond. So this is a really fascinating development. SpaceX just recently opened their office in Redmond. This was the event at Seattle Center where they banned the press from, maybe that's too strong a word, they told us we were not invited. And so our reporter Taylor Soper stood outside and listened and shot through the window. This is the kind of we'll do it if we have to. Don't mess with us. This is a great story, and this is I think one of the most fascinating things to watch. If you haven't been following SpaceX, now you have even more reason to do so. Now, if you follow the most recent news from SpaceX, you know that it's also challenging, and they had an explosion on their latest mission to resupply the International Space Station. So this is not by any means guaranteed that these things are going to succeed, but it's one of the most exciting areas right now. And of course, tying it back to the beginning, this gentleman is also very much immersed in space. This is obviously Jeff Bezos, and he has his venture, Blue Origin, which is based, of all places, the Kent Valley, which I love the Kent Valley, but you wouldn't think of a cutting-edge rocket coming out of the warehouses out there, right? But it's really, it's a fascinating development, and he's also very much tied in with some of the US commercial contracts and working with various folks, including the United Launch Alliance, which is a Boeing venture. And this was Blue Origin successfully taking off just recently on the test flight of one of their new rockets. So that is where we are, and that's I think where we're headed. And that is really the beauty of all these big companies operating here, and the ability to essentially take all of the heritage, bring it together into this new venture. So underlying all of that, you have this super strong ecosystem of startups. Now, it's not on the level of Silicon Valley in terms of the volume or the level of investment going into these companies, and that is one of the challenges that we have. But if you look at the quality of the startups in the Seattle region, it's really unmatched outside of Silicon Valley. One little trick for you, if we were talking a little bit about, Dwight was talking about the website. If you go to GeekWire and you click on the resources tab, that is by far, I think, one of the most useful places you can go on the site for lead generation and business development if you're in that business. And one of the resources that we have is called the GeekWire 200. We take a list, a proprietary list that we have of 900 startups in the Seattle region, tech startups, and then we run an algorithm across it that ranks those companies by their size in terms of employees, their social media presence, and it turns out this list, which you can go check out on GeekWire, the GeekWire 200, and it's dynamic, it moves every month, and it's really a fascinating way to track them. Another huge trend that we've been seeing, this has in some ways, I hesitate to use this phrase, but in some ways Seattle has become Silicon Valley North. It started with Google opening an office here in 2004. They started with just a couple of employees. But since then, we've seen Facebook, Dropbox, Hulu, Zynga, Salesforce. It's difficult to name at this point a Silicon Valley company or a California technology company that doesn't have an engineering office in Seattle. This is actually in the Seattle region. There are some in Bellevue and Redmond as well. So this is something really key to watch. Alibaba also has an engineering office here. Just a fascinating trend to watch. We also have a list that you can check out of all these companies. This has changed the dynamic in the region in a couple of different ways. In the short term, it's actually been painful for some startups because the war for talent is so intense right now, and this has only intensified it. It's made it much more difficult for startups to retain and recruit top engineers at salaries, at least, that they were in the past. So it's causing some short-term pain. That said, I think over time, it's a very good thing for the region. You've already started to see some of these companies essentially spin off their own startups. One example is Ari Steinberg, who was the head of the Facebook Seattle office for several years at the beginning. He has left, he came up from Facebook's office in Silicon Valley, and he stayed here at Facebook for a while, and then he left Facebook, but he stayed in the region and launched his own travel technology startup. So that is just one example of the spin-off effect that these kinds of companies can have over time, as long as the market can sustain the increased competition for talent in the meantime. And of course, the cloud computing. This is really just huge. And I think it's probably competing with commercial space for the prize of the biggest driver, the biggest potential driver of the economy. Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Windows, Azure, which is the worst brand in the world because everybody says it incorrectly. You got Azure, but trust me, it is Azure. That's how they say it. I asked Ray Ozzie, the former Microsoft chief software architect, who came up with it. How do you pronounce it? It's Azure. But they are really defining cloud computing. They are number one and number two, essentially, by many measures right now in terms of this whole concept that is driving technology right now. Remote data centers acting as your storage and computing power, providing on-demand services, flexibility for companies. No longer on the enterprise side do they need to have servers in the back room. They're essentially in the cloud, which frankly means Quincy. Yes. Yeah. Actually, yes. Quincy is driving a lot of this because of the access to cheap power. So this is another key trend to watch. This is kind of the sleeper industry of the region in a lot of ways. Valve software. Does anybody, I asked earlier about who was using Windows XP and Windows 7. Is anybody a Steam account holder in this? There you go. All right. So, okay, good. So Steam is essentially the iTunes of video games. So it has about 70% market share. It's where almost all PC gamers inevitably end up going to buy, download, and play games. And Valve is right over there. You know, and they are right here in Bellevue and looking to expand. And they are just a company that's really driving things. And it's one of those companies that you don't think of right away when you think of the tech economy. And because of that, it's an example of just how strong things are, that you don't think of Valve, the most dominant PC gaming platform, as necessarily driving the economy. But they're here with a very alternative, flat management structure. I think they should have some Harvard Business Review case studies of how Gabe Newell runs the company, if they haven't already. PopCap and Big Fish, both of which have been acquired over the past few years. And of course, Microsoft Xbox in Redmond and Nintendo of America, based right around the corner from Xbox in Redmond. So this is another key factor in the economy, and it also drives other sectors. One of the things that Elon Musk looks for when he hires engineers is video game developers, because it turns out that there's a lot of similarities between simulating a landing on the space station and the Halo games. I mean, it's not that far off in terms of the engineering that you have to understand, the physics that you have to command virtually. It's really a lot of similarities. This is the other giant area, life sciences and biotech. And the reason I don't think it's a driver like video games and, well, a driver like cloud computing and commercial space is that the development timelines are just so long. The FDA approval process is so difficult. If any of you are in this field, you know that, so I don't have to tell you that. But this is Juno Therapeutics, which is probably one of the fastest launches to IPO that we've ever seen. Juno is essentially a Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center spin-out. And what they do is they take the red blood cells out of a patient, reprogram them. So essentially reprogram the T cells that would normally fight a common cold, but they reprogram them to fight cancer in that same patient. And they've already started to see some huge success and signed some big commercial agreements. This is another really important company to watch if you're tracking the local economy. And it's a sign, at least, of the potential for biotech, even after the essential exit of Amgen. And you know about this one, right? This is the Global Innovation Exchange, which is going up in the Spring District, right where Amazon was founded, close to it. This is a collaboration of the University of Washington and Tsinghua University from China. It's the first Chinese research institution that will be based in the United States, and it's going into Bellevue. It's going to be right on the light rail line eventually there in the Spring District. And this, to me, is a great example of how the existence and the presence of these established players like the University of Washington and all of these other companies, such as Microsoft, which is putting $40 million into this, can come together to essentially start to invent the future. This is a graduate technology school that they're going to be starting here in Bellevue. All right, so what could I change? What could we change if we wanted to? This is my list. I'm sure everybody has their own, but from a technology perspective, one thing you see with startups here is you look at them, and at times, especially at the beginning, they can start to feel like a hobby, and rather than a real serious business. And in part, that's because Microsoft employees and Amazon employees are starting them as side projects. But we aren't seeing as many companies here as they do in Silicon Valley make giant bets right out of the beginning. There are some exceptions, but one thing that the economy would benefit from is entrepreneurs really swinging for the fences and trying to hit grand slams, to use a horrible baseball analogy. A good example of a company that's bucking this trend, at least right now, is a company called Porch, based in Seattle, over on East Lake now. They're moving down to the former Zulily headquarters in Sodo. They are a home improvement data startup. What they've done is they've gone out and collected all sorts of data on your neighbor's home improvement projects. So you can go on there and figure out how much your neighbor paid to have their kitchen renovated, which contractor they used, and whether they recommend the contractor. And that's something that they're doing, and it's sort of a competitive space. Amazon has gotten into this space as well. Sears just launched Sears Home Services in downtown Seattle, and so that is something that's really important. Big bets from VCs. I think you see a lot of folks leave Microsoft and Amazon, and they don't necessarily act as angel investors or see tech startups as someplace that they should invest, and that is something that would improve things. More STEM capacity, which obviously gets into the legislative discussion. More opportunities for people who grew up in Washington State to learn computer science, engineering, technology, math here in the region. Amazon's relative community apathy, I think, is something else that would be nice to change. They generally are focused so much on their customers that they're not as much focused on their environment and their surroundings. And that would be a big thing to change, if I could put that diplomatically. Transportation solutions, affordable housing, and widespread availability of gigabit broadband, which is something that Seattle in particular is grappling with right now in the city. Very quickly, that gives you a sense for where we see things going. GeekWire, our vision from the beginning, when John Cook and I started the company, was that the region, this region that I just told you about, deserves its own national technology news site. We don't look at ourselves as a local site. We are not your local newspaper reincarnated on the web. Our idea is that there are so many things happening here that deserve to be told on a broader stage. And actually, the vast majority of our readership, even though we're very strong here in the Puget Sound region, but the majority of our readership is actually global because of the strong interest in everything that's happening here. I would really encourage you to use this for business leads. There's so much going on the site, so many things to pick up and to capitalize on. We have a site called GeekWork that is technology jobs, great place to hire and find jobs. And then the startup resources I was telling you about earlier. The best thing you can do is sign up for our daily email newsletter and read our community calendar. Listen to us on Cairo on the weekends, on KUOWM on every other week, on the record and the noon hour. And then attend our events. That's really the big thing. We have our Sounders Day coming up this weekend where we get folks out to a big rooftop party. And that's John right there. I get to work with that guy. And then our big event in the fall is the GeekWire Summit. We have speakers coming up, including Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, and John Markoff, the New York Times science and technology reporter, who will be discussing his new book on artificial intelligence, and a whole host of other influential and big name speakers. So I'd encourage you to go to the site and check out all those things. That's it, and I think I butted right up against our time here. But I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Sure, yeah, sure. Any questions?
What's your take on Alibaba coming in?
Yeah. Jacob and I were talking about this on the drive over, actually. So I'll steal some of your thoughts. This is all Jacob. In a lot of ways, they're complementary businesses. Alibaba was designed for the developing world. Amazon designed really with the US in mind first. And so they're not directly competitive. In a lot of ways, their offerings are different. That said, they're very competitive in the market for talent. And I don't think it's any mistake or any coincidence that the Alibaba engineering offices, you can walk there. You can walk to Amazon or jump on the streetcar to get to Alibaba. So I think it's fascinating. And of course, Alibaba also invested in Zulily, the Seattle-based e-commerce company. So interesting company to watch. Obviously, Jack Ma is a very charismatic and influential founder. I don't see them posing a real competitive threat to Amazon domestically in the short term. Yeah. Thank you very much.